Everybody, obviously, that of the remote meeting protocol, everybody will be muted, and if you're asked to speak, then unmute yourself, speak and mute yourself again once you've finished. I will indicate that I've seen that you've put your hand up, your virtual hand up to speak, and I'll invite you in then when we open the floor up to questions, and then of course when we open the floor up to comments as well. Okay, for officers and guests, you can turn off your cameras at the moment, and you can turn them on then when you are actually reporting to us, presenting parts of the report, or when you wish to speak again. And again, for officers and guests, if you can indicate by putting your virtual hand up, and I will then invite you in. Okay. Okay, well, it is now 4:01. Prynawn dda pawb. Welcome to this afternoon's Scrutiny meeting. It's 4 p.m. just gone on Monday, the 20th of June. I shall remind all again, as I said, that this is now being recorded. We'll pop straight onto the agenda items. Agenda item number 1. Are there any apologies for absence? If Democratics can note that Councillor Gareth Lewis has let me know he's actually in interviews at Abercanid School at the moment. He will join us as quickly as he can. So if there are no other apologies, we'll continue on to agenda item number 2. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No? Okay. Then before I move into agenda item number 3 and the work programme, can I say a warm welcome to our Cabinet member, Michelle Jones, and of course our officers from our learning department as well. So welcome to everybody this afternoon. We'll move straight into agenda item number 3 then, which is the Scrutiny work programme 2022-2023. And that is really to have a look at how we're going to take that forward and discuss then any scrutiny referrals as well. Okay. Who's taking this report for us? Michelle?
Me. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, if you can do that for me, thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you very much for your welcome, and nice to see everybody here today. So just to give you a brief outline of the report, it's regarding the findings of the Eston inspection of the Local Authorities Education Services, which was undertaken in January 2022. A summary of this report will also be presented to full council on the 6th of July. Section 3 outlines the framework under which the inspection was carried out, including at 3.4 the 4 questions that were specific to Merthyr Tydfil. Previous councillors were involved in pre-inspection work and would be aware of the documentation that was shared by the director and her team at an all-councillor workshop, and previous members of this committee have received detailed self-evaluation reports from the department. Section 5.2 outlines the positives identified within the report, and it is pleasing to see so many, including the reference to the Raising Aspiration, Raising Standards strategy, which of course was approved by our council in November 2020. There are, of course, with any inspection, recommendations, the main ones of which are outlined at 5.2 with the wider recommendations outlined at 5.3. Section 7 outlines what the department is doing to address the recommendations, and the appendices include some more detail around actions and evidence from our School Improvement Service, that's Central South Consortium, the department's attendance improvement plan, and plans to address the recommendations for learners with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties. Officers from the department and CSE are with us today to provide more information where needed. Chair, I would like to ask if there are any questions, please.
Thank you, Michelle, as our Cabinet member. And just to explain to my colleagues in Scrutiny as well, we're just going to shift some items around, agenda items around. So thank you so much, Michelle, for giving us the overview of that. I'm going to open it up to the floor. Colleagues, are there any questions you'd like to ask in relation to this report, please? You can show a virtual hand on the screen. Jeff, I'll bring you in first.
Thanks, Chair. Very kind, and a special welcome to Michelle. I've not seen you before, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Eston whenever it presents reports, is challenging. I'm sure you agree. And I've got some questions, just first of all, Chair, just on the conclusions at the front. Perhaps we'll go through it as you want to go through it later on and ask questions. So I've got just a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind, Chair. Is that okay?
Absolutely, Jeff, no problem at all.
Thanks, Chair. Within the Eston report, it states that the general information it used about the community of Merthyr Tydfil was that it had less BAME pupils than other areas of Wales. At age 5 and over, there was less fluency in the Welsh language than other areas of Wales. It had the second highest looked after children in Wales in 150 and 10,000, and education increased budget to above the Welsh average. So several questions on these facts, please. Is the education budget ring-fenced? How will the education budget give positive impact on students? How and what evidence can be shown to support the theory of increase in budget increases the performance, and over what time period? And if I'll leave those questions for the moment, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jeff. Michelle, I'm not sure if it's you or if there's a colleague and officer that's going to answer some of those questions.
Can I direct that to Sue, please?
She's jumped straight in.
Hello,
there,
Sue.
Michelle. She jumped straight in.
Hi,
there.
Jeff.
Thanks, Sue.
I'm actually going to pass this to two other officers to actually consider. This is calling you sort of passing it, down the line. I'm going to ask Anthony to actually pick up on the ring fenced and that aspect, and then I'm going to ask to pass over to Central South about the positive impact on students, because obviously they do that aspect of the work for us. So I think, Anthony, if you could answer the questions about the ring fenceness, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. And then if perhaps Betson or Helen can pick up on sort of the impact on learners, and if Andrea is also on the call. Andrea May is our new sort of head of achievement as well, but so, she's obviously new to the department, so I'm not sure if she just wants to leave it to Betson, but Anthony and Betson will take this. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Thanks, Jeff. I think in terms of the first question regarding any ring-fenced element to the budget, we obviously receive our settlement from Welsh Government, and they use various formulae within that, and part of that determines how much funding is provided for education. And then the budget is set based on our priorities, based on our service priorities, as we go through the budget rounds and agree that then with councillors and with Cabinet. So once that budget is set, then there's an expectation that is spent for the purposes which has been given. And I think Eston picked up on the fact that we are spending well in excess of the monies that are allocated to us from Welsh Government. So the funding isn't ring-fenced, but obviously you have to bid for a budget for your services to deliver against certain priorities during the year. So that's the process that we go through. There is an element of value for money assessments that are undertaken as part of that. And that was particularly done when we had access to the performance data for pupils with regards to key stage 4 outcomes. And there was a piece of work that was done periodically by Steve Jones, the Chief Finance Officer, that was looking at the performance of our schools with regards to pupil outcomes, cross-referenced against the funding and the average funding levels in Merthyr. And so I think that showed, certainly around 2016, at the time we were taking up the Eston monitoring, that there'd been significant progress with regards to improved performance outcomes at that time, and that the money was being well spent. Obviously, we haven't had performance measures in place now for a few years, and so there's work being done around what that new accountability framework needs to look like. And I think at that time we can consider the value for money across the board. We do consider value for money within individual projects, in terms of what's the impact that they're having, and is the money being well spent, and is that being targeted in the right way? And again, that features across different services in different ways, and that was something Eston explored with us, and I think they've commented on that within the report, to say that the need for us to have systems and processes in place that assess and consider value for money and use those considerations to consider where we spend our money, that they are now in place within the authority, and there's evidence of that, albeit that is always something which is a work in progress as well. It's not something you ever resolve fully or sort of crack the nut on. It's just something you need to be reflected on and asking yourselves those questions. So I think that picks up a couple of those points. Jeff, I'm not sure if Betson wants to come in with regard to the other questions you picked up on performance of learners.
Here I am, unmuted and visible. Just in order to clarify, are you asking me to report on the individual progress of those groups of learners that you mentioned there, the BAME, the Welsh speakers? Is that what you're wanting me to highlight?
No, in general, please, Betson.
In general, from what Eston used for their inspection findings was the data from 2019, because I think, as Anthony mentioned earlier, the last data set that is public is that information from 2019. Now, what we've been doing in the intervening period is trying to support schools to make sure that they are able to evaluate the progress of learners whilst they've been in school, or of course at home during this period, isn't it? And that's been a far more complex task to look at pupil progress during that time. So we're awaiting now, obviously, the results this year, and I think the best thing that we would be in a position to do would be to come back and answer this question when we've got published data to inform you fully, rather than go school by school, because I think that wouldn't be fully appropriate. Is that fair, Sue? Do you think that would be a more sensible approach? Because of the changes in data collation, as you probably know, they've taken some of the expectations on us away in terms of publishing data, and we'll be in a better position at the end of this summer period to report on external examinations, and then we'd be collecting on a school by school basis rather than on a local authority wide basis.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that, Chair. I do see that, and it makes a lot of sense. But you'll also be aware within Scrutiny, Chair, that we part of the report says that the education scrutiny needs to be more robust, I think is the words. And so with that robustness in mind, could you put some sort of date on that? I don't mean an exact date, Sue or Betson, I mean an approximate date, by which time we should be able to compare where we are now or where we were to where we are at the date given, and we could be able to see progress or otherwise, as the case may be, and then you'd be able to come back to us with additional improvements or, in fact, remedial actions that needed to take place. Is that acceptable?
Yes, certainly. I think it would be available Wednesday. When would it usually happen in the authority? October?
Right, in previous, when we had data, and I'm not sure, Jeff, you were on the committee at this time, it's always come in sort of this in September, where we were able to give an overview of where we were. We always used to wait until the results were finalised to be able to, so it went in January. However, as we will not be publishing school by school information, and we will not be publishing actually sort of final figures, we should be able to give you, if this is what Scrutiny choose that they want to actually scrutinise, we should be able to bring information to you early in the autumn term. But that's obviously something for you to consider under the forward work plan as to how this, what you want to scrutinise and exactly what you want us to bring to you. Bearing in mind, it's not all about Key Stage 4. We need to look at primary schools. We need to look at primary schools, and we need to look at evidence from actually from baseline right the way through.
Thanks, Sue. I'll just bring Andrea in there, who's indicated that she wishes to speak as well.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps a consideration also for committee members would be the new documentation that will be released at the end of the month, linked to school improvement guidance and accountability, which has quite a considerable focus around the wider use of the term data, in a sense, rather than perhaps the percentage figures that we're used to as well. So that's perhaps something that you may want to consider in the forward planning, because data as we knew it previously has gone and be replaced far more now by first-hand evidence, looking at sort of what schools are utilising in terms of their self-evaluation procedures and processes as well. So that's perhaps something for consideration.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Sue, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at different ways of working and actually looking at how we scrutinise things, that might be better not as a report coming from us, but actually as a workshop that we actually share with members. So there is that open dialogue, and the questions and that which are sometimes stifled, dare I say it, by a formal meeting, that we actually had a workshop around exactly what Andrea is talking about there, and actually how we can sort of look at that in quite an open and constructive way forward to help members in their understanding of how we are, what we've got moving forward.
Thank you, Sue. And Jeff, before I bring you back in, just to remind colleagues on the scrutiny group that in the pre-meet, which I appreciate some of you couldn't make last week, but this was something that we were talking about and indicating, because inevitably, you know, I'd like to see us having more opportunity to get out of the formal process of scrutiny and have workshops and inquiry days and things like that as well. So, you know, when we have our reflection element of today's meeting, I've made some notes and we'll pick up on that then and include that in our discussions with Sue when I meet with Gareth regarding the forward work plan. So thank you for that. Jeff, I'm going to come back to you. Are there any further questions on this item?
Yes, please, Chair. Just one, maybe two, but one for the start. Eston made mention of a cultural change being implemented by the Education Department. So the question is, this cultural change is in addition to the Welsh Government curriculum change. How will these twin approaches go to affect the lives of both students and the educational professionals, and are all Merthyr education establishments ready for the changes? If they're not, how many from the primary secondary are not ready, and what support is in place to assist them to be ready in the shortest possible time? And when would the department expect this readiness to be achieved?
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So sort of three prongs to that question, Sue. I'll give you the opportunity to come in and then Jeff can remind us of the other elements of it if we forget.
So from my understanding of the question, Jeff, you were talking about the cultural shift that Eston referred to in the report. I think the cultural shift has come about by actually working closer together with schools, by actually not having things done to schools, but actually doing things alongside schools and with schools. And one of the things that came out from the Eston inspection was the fact that the RAS strategy was known by everybody who they actually spoke to. There was that golden thread right the way through. And I think that's what we've tried to do in everything that we've been doing with schools, is actually make sure that they're involved. It's not always possible, but this is something that we really want to do. And if I bring up another example, is last Friday, in April, we had our first face-to-face head teachers conference that had taken since January 2020. Ellis came and opened it and gave the head teachers the opportunity to ask what they wanted, how they wanted to move forward in collaboration with the local authority. That led to a day of meetings last week between Ellis and myself, where we met with all the head teachers in cluster groups, and we actually discussed what their concerns were. It's left me with quite a long list to do, which I have sort of actually shared with officers as well. But the intention is that we will continue to do this on a termly basis to be able to sort of get that collaboration. I'm not taking the credit for the way that we worked, because it was something that CSC had actually put in place to look at their work. But I think it's a way of getting to all head teachers in a smaller group, not in a large group, because whilst we've only got a small number of head teachers, you do get certain members that will dominate that question, but actually in a cluster group to be able to get that information. So that was the cultural shift that Eston referred to, is that collegiate way of actually working and working with people rather than doing things to them.
Thank you, Sue. Jeff, bear with me. I'm just going to bring Betson in at that point as well.
Thank you, Lisa. I think as just to echo Sue's points there, I think that they also refer to the relationship between Central South and the local authority and schools, like a tripartite approach, and that communication and that collaboration, again, contributing to better support for schools. And then the next part of your question was around curriculum change and readiness. One of the key pieces of work that we've been doing over the past year, we've been taking a dip sample, for want of a better word, in terms of surveying schools about their readiness. And then we've been tempering that with the expertise and knowledge of the improvement partners in the schools. So we've been doing that piece on an ongoing basis. We did identify a very small number of schools within the authority that needed additional support. We've provided them with additional support. Everybody in Wales and every school in this local authority have had specific core support around curriculum design, etc. But as I mentioned, some people need a little bit more. We've given a little bit more to those who needed it. And then at the end of this academic year, we will be providing Sue with a report at the end of this kind of term of all schools' readiness, and that will be provided by the team in Central South that leads on curriculum support. In addition to supporting, obviously, teaching assistants, teachers and school leaders, we've also been working with governors. And myself and my colleague who's on this call, Helen Power, met with governors in the local authority only last week, looking in particular at the statutory aspects that need to be ready by September and looking at compliance against those key aspects. So we're trying to cover off all angles. It's a big change, but it is a staged approach, which we know about. So we will be informing and supporting throughout as schools go through this process over time.
Great, thank you, Diolch Betson. Jeff, back to you. Any further questions, or did you want to just have any clarification on any of those answers?
I don't need clarification. I'm very grateful for the fulsome response. There isn't any other parts I want to say, except just one. Could somebody tell me who the lead safeguarding manager for education is, please?
It was Sarah Bowen. Jeff, Sarah has left the authority as of May the 31st. I don't know if Gavin wants to explain where we're going to take that now.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. We're in the process of looking to advertise a post specifically to work around safeguarding. And in the interim, I'm filling in with John Eyre, supporting to ensure that nothing is lost on the way.
Thanks, okay. Gavin. Jeff, any further questions?
Not at this moment, Lisa, but if I can reserve the right to come back later on if anything needs to.
Yes, of course. Colleagues, any other questions from any other members of our scrutiny group? If you can indicate now. Councillor Scriven, Jamie.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just going to recommendation 1, obviously the inspection outlined there was an inconsistent approach in quality of self-evaluations and improvement planning work within the services and teams. So I just wanted to ask really, can you expand on what frameworks are currently used for those processes within our teams and services, and what forms of quality control we've got in place to ensure there's a consistent approach to good practice amongst the teams that we're working with?
Sue's coming in there, Jamie, bear with me.
Okay, I'm going to, Anthony may very well pop in on this one as well, because he's got an understanding of this as well. We currently use what we call business improvement plans. So we'll actually look at business, we'll actually, under sort of our team plans will have a business improvement plan, which sets out what we're looking for and actually how we're going to manage it throughout the year. There were differences which we'd started that process last September. So if you consider that Eston came in January, we hadn't even done a full year cycle of it. So I think that inspection, that comment was valid, because we were looking to monitor and looking to actually adapt it throughout the year. Since the inspection report, so that then feeds into information. We also collect information from Central South under each of the key questions, and we collect information from other service areas, because it's not just the learning department that impact on schools, it's other service areas as well. Following the report, we've had a whole day session with team managers. So that included people from other service areas as well, to actually look at what's the importance of self-evaluation, why do we do it, and what systems and processes are we going to put in place to ensure that we address that recommendation. We've got another session coming up with our team leaders in July, where we will look in particular at what is a good success criteria, and how do we actually monitor that, bearing in mind that a lot of us are teachers, so this is what this is where we've sort of come from, but actually sort of looking at that moving forward, and then making sure that we've got that consistent approach to monitoring as we go forward next year. Ant, I don't know if you want to come in any more and explain the detail a little bit better.
Yeah, just a little bit. So just to add, I think you've covered most of the points really. I think it was the quality of the success criteria that was picked up by Eston as being inconsistent. And so that's something which we need to ensure there's more robust quality control regarding moving forwards now into the next academic year's business improvement plans. And so part of that will be fulfilled by the Education Services leadership team to ensure that we have sight across each other's improvement plans and priorities, and that we're able to challenge the success criteria and ensuring that they're meaningful and robust, and also working more closely with our scrutiny and performance team around that quality control element to ensure that there's that consistency across the piece. It did happen last year, but as Sue said, because Eston came in and we were focused on that, I think the new processes we put in place from September last year, we weren't able to fully embed them and ensure that the quality was consistent across the piece. So we look to ensure that's the case going forwards. And as well as the success criteria, it was also around the impact, the consideration of the impact of the actions that have been undertaken and how well they're addressing the priorities. And again, we're coming to the end of the first year of the new improvement planning cycle. And so impact will be considered as part of the evaluation now at the end of the summer term. And that will be used then to help us to target the priorities more effectively from September, and to be a bit more precise and a bit more robust with the success criteria we include and the impacts that we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Anthony. Sue, did you want to come back in there? Sorry.
Yes, please. I would also say that this was also a corporate recommendation. It wasn't just for education. I think they were quite clear in the feedback that this went across the board, because don't forget we had Audit Wales in our inspection process as well, so they'd looked at other processes within the local authority. So whilst we're obviously looking at a service level aspect, there is work that needs to be done on a local authority level as well.
Great, thank you, Sue. Jamie, did you want to come back with any questions there?
Yeah, I've got a few more questions, or everyone can bear with me, but thank you both for your answer. Going on to recommendation 3, just around the issues of the impact of the extended use of reduced timetables. I just wanted to know why it was we were not able to provide the assurance that this was suitable for those pupils concerned, because as I'm aware from the inspection report, we're talking about pupils on a reduced timetable for over 4 weeks. So just want to know if there's any clarity to that, really.
I'll take that one, Chair.
Thank you, Gavin.
Our view was that there was clarity. It's something that we'll discuss with the representatives from Eston tomorrow at our Lally meeting. We have a very thorough approach to monitoring those pupils that are on reduced timetables. Far more thorough, I would say, than other local authorities that I've actually worked in. And so obviously there was some elements of information that the inspector wanted that we didn't provide in our initial bundle of evidence that we provided subsequently. But that was one comment that I was quite disappointed remained in the report. So that will be something that we'll be taking it up with Eston. If I just add that schools inform us if they're considering placing pupils on a reduced timetable. We keep a register of those pupils. We diarise when the 4 weeks is up, so that we can ensure that an officer is in attendance at any meeting that takes place regarding that. We have, I think, robust challenge to schools around those pupils that are on reduced timetables. Having said that, I would also say that we do have a large number of pupils that are on reduced timetables. It does feed into the wider issues that are raised around recommendation 3 in terms of a range of provision that we're also looking at, and I know is in the appendix. So there we'll know more tomorrow around that, but certainly the work ongoing will ensure that any areas that Eston think aren't quite as they should be will be covered.
Thank you, Gavin. Jamie, do you wish to continue with other questions you may have? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll try and amend these into one question, make it a bit easier. I was just looking through some of the information on the Early Help Hub and the PRU. Now, obviously, there was some information saying about referrals doubling in the last year in terms of the Early Help Hub. I was just wondering, is this COVID related or is this something else that's popped up? What was that reason for the increase in referrals coming through? And in the same way, the issues concerning the PRU, following the peer-to-peer review, what were the recommendations from the PRU and what actions have we taken on that?
Sue, thank you.
I'll do the first bit and then I'll ask Gavin to come in around the PRU. So if we look at the first one, oh, sorry, remind me, Jamie, what the first bit was.
Sorry,
was it the Early Help Hub?
Yeah,
right,
the Early
okay.
Help Hub.
It was, I think it's a mixture of both. We've done a lot of work with schools around the Early Help Hub and how it can be used to support families. So I think it is partly to do with the pandemic, but it's also partly to do with we've re-established that link with schools and we're actually making we're using that more. We've sort of supported them to use it more effectively. So yes, it is a mixture of both. It's their awareness, but also it is the pandemic as well. So yeah, so I'll ask Gavin to come in with the next part.
And did this related to the outcomes of the peer-to-peer inspection? Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So a very thorough inspection or a joint piece of work took place. The outcome of that is a very significant action plan that encompasses both elements for the PRU to put in place, but also we wanted to ensure that we had one plan. We didn't have a plan for Gail, who leads that provision, another one for the local authority, something else for children's services, something else for the consortium. So we've got one plan. And we've pulled all the elements into that one plan. We have fortnightly review meetings in terms of ensuring that the actions are ticked off as we go forward. The range is from teaching and learning, vision, re-inclusion, development of curriculum. It's a very wide and broad plan. It will be discussed, I think, at the management committee. I think it's either next week or the week after. And I meet with Gail, like I said, with Helen from Central South on a fortnightly basis to monitor the implementation of the plan.
Thank you, Gavin. Jamie, any further questions or would you like anything else clarified?
If I can just go back to re-clarify on the PRU. So one of the things I was interested in, is there anything relevant in the recommendations that would link to the issues we've got around attendance to the unit since we've come out of the pandemic? Was there anything in the recommendations perhaps that suggested that's a barrier that's causing that problem?
We know that attendance across the borough has been low as a result of the pandemic. And we know that there have been significant concerns for pupils that attend the PRU. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily sort of out of the ordinary in terms of the type of need that we're seeing, but it is something that we're conscious of. As a local authority, we've provided additional capacity to Gale to work with families, some additional education welfare capacity. We're looking to increase that capacity again using some grant funding from Welsh Government. So we know that there are particular struggles, and some of them aren't resolvable just by some door knocking. They do require a multi-service, multi-agency approach, and we're supporting the Gale and the team in that too. So it is particularly tricky. We did a piece of work recently about with actual pupil voice to look at whether transport was a concern for them, and actually the outcome of that wasn't that was significant. So we do know that there's a lot of apathy following COVID that we're slowly trying to chip away at dealing with.
Thank you, Gavin. Jamie, any further questions?
Yeah, just 2 more questions, Chair. Thank you. Right. The Tackling Poverty Strategic Group, what support are they currently giving to the implementation of the RAS strategy? Because that was something that was mentioned within the inspection, and they feel that there's more support that could be needed. So I was just interested, what's the current level of support that they give?
Sure. Yeah. It wasn't support per se. It was actually the link, because we've got a Tackling Poverty Strategic Group, and we've got the Education Partnership Panel, on which Lisa sat last year as Education Portfolio Lead, and Harvey sat as Chair of Scrutiny. So obviously Michelle and Lisa will be sitting on it now moving forward. The Tackling Poverty Group has got the Poverty Champion on it, and the fact it was to ensure that there was a cross-reference. So actually the Tackling Poverty Group were aware of what was going on in the Education Partnership Panel, and vice versa. Well, Lisa Curtis-Jones sits on the Education Partnership Panel, and Taryn has been. So it is making sure that agenda item, there is that link. And I think what we are intending to do in the next Education Partnership Panel is clearly show what that link is, and our link inspectors actually attend the Education Partnership Panel. So perhaps we did a little bit of an own goal there, in that we weren't as visible in what the links were, because if you look at the old corporate plan, the Tackling Poverty agenda is a golden thread throughout it. So whereas we've done a lot of work on tackling poverty, we weren't perhaps within all groups, we weren't as explicit in sharing that moving forward. But that poverty agenda is a priority for the local authority, and obviously there's a lot of work and been undertaken in the education field for that as well.
Thank you, Sue. Jamie, bear with me. Betson just wants to come in there.
Thank you. I just thought I'd take the opportunity, if you don't mind, Chair, just to mention the fact that as a consequence of some of the feedback from the inspection, that we are doing a joint piece of work looking at the impact of the financial support that goes in for all children, obviously, on free school meals. And we know that free school meals is used in education as a proxy for poverty, and drawing together the strands of the poverty agenda within the authority and the equity and excellence strategy within Central South, and trying to bring all of that together in an evaluation at the end of this year. So we can, I'm sure, Sue, pass that forward to the Scrutiny Committee when it's available.
Yeah, that'd be appreciated. Thank you, Betson. Yeah, definitely. Okay, Jamie, any further questions?
Yes, Chair, just my last question. One of the things I wanted to ask was what work has taken place to inform the Central South Consortium leads around the poverty and the disadvantage strategies that we've got in place? Because that was one of the key things brought up in the report as well, that there was a lack of understanding from all CSE strategic leads on our poverty and disadvantage strategies. And I'm just thinking from my perspective, if our strategies are not understood, this could cause a breakdown in support that we receive, and the collaborative approaches won't work as well if we're not singing from the same hymn sheet. So I just want to know what efforts or what attempts have been made to make sure that they're aware of everything that goes on.
Thank you, Jamie. Who's going to go first? We've got a double act, you know. We've got Sue and Betson. Let's dive into Sue first, and then Betson after Sue.
The poverty lead within Central South had actually attended a Teams meeting. This was pre-COVID, to actually share the work that was actually being done on the poverty agenda in Central South with the team leaders. So there had already been a link made. However, I think because we haven't got an actual strategy that you can pull off a page, it is interwoven within our plan. I think that's where it possibly sort of fell down, that you had a lot of information about PDG and a lot of information about what was being undertaken. But when you're asked the question, well, what's your understanding of the tackling poverty strategy? Well, actually, we haven't got a single strategy. It's interwoven into everything. So I think that that's where that came from. But Betson, I'm sure you can put more meat on the bones.
Yeah, probably my preemptive strike was a bit too soon, really, there. So what we're trying to do is to, recognise that we had, dropped the ball there really a little bit, and we hadn't aligned our strategies effectively enough. So we're now doing this piece of work to get them all drawn together and use that opportunity to review it against also some of the RAS strategy priorities, because there's an overlap, isn't there? We're talking about well-being, the impact of poverty on standards in school. So trying to bring all of these strands together, and at least it will give us a baseline for future work that the team can do together, and hopefully oil the cogs of collaboration as we're doing it.
Thank you, Betson. And I think, look, I think what we need to recognise there, just from my perspective as chair, is that we are honest about it, and our sense of honesty just shows that, it's real and we are endeavouring to do something about it, but recognising that is vitally important as well. So thank you for that. Jamie, you all okay? Any further questions?
Yeah, that's everything from me, Chair. Thank you. And can I reserve right to speak further should something come up?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Thank you,
Councillor. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Councillor Gareth Lewis has joined us. Thank you, Gareth. I did give your apologies just explaining your position. So, thank you for joining us with regards to this item. Colleagues, are there any other questions from scrutiny members in relation to this particular report, agenda item number 5? Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the point of pupils on reduced timetables. The Eston report highlights an increase in pupils on reduced timetables in 2021. How does this increase compare to other local authorities? And if it's considered to be significantly higher, what do officers think is the reason behind that increase?
We don't have comparative data on reduced timetables, so we don't know what other local authorities figures look like. I think it's fair to say, though, that reduced timetables are used by schools quite widely, and certainly from sort of anecdotal conversations with other local authorities, they've seen an increase in reduced timetables over the last 4 terms, as they have sort of seen other complexities increase as well. So it's hard for us to compare against other local authorities. What was the second part of the question?
Well, I was just asking if there was such data available, if it was a particular problem in Merthyr compared to other local authorities, but obviously that data isn't available.
Yeah, I mean, if I take the question in a slightly different direction, our interpretation of and our realistic kind of evaluation in our preparation for Eston was that we need to see an increase in the number of pupils on a reduced timetable. And so that's fitting in with part of the work that we're doing, where we're looking at vocational provision, alternative education arrangements, therapeutic provision, the role of the pupil referral unit and special tuition. So it's very much on our agenda in terms of ensuring that only those that absolutely there's a justifiable reason for them to be on a reduced timetable with a clear plan for them to go back into full-time education, actually access a part-time timetable.
Anna, are you okay with that? Did you have any further questions?
Yes, thank you, Gavin. I had some questions related to attendance. Is that now the appropriate time, Lisa?
Yes, of course, please fire away.
Thank you. Initially I was going to ask what are the current levels of attendance across the borough as a percentage, and how does that compare to pre-pandemic levels?
I don't have the figures in front of me, but we have a lower number of pupils in school than we did pre-pandemic.
Anna, we can follow that up and get that information to you, just so you've got the actual figures, and then we can use some comparisons then to have a look at it, perhaps at our next meeting. But I think just to support you on that as chair, inevitably, I think we've seen a decrease because it's what we now see in post COVID, you know, and the impact it's having on children and families in general as well. So carry on, Anna.
Thank you. Well, again, I don't know whether this information will be available or would be for follow-up. I was wondering whether there was an observed difference between attendance at a primary and secondary level, and if one was a particular issue at this point in time.
When we share the data with you, which I think is a really good idea, you'll be able to sort of unpick that a little bit. But in general, we're seeing attendance at primary pick up a little bit quicker than we are at secondary. We are seeing some struggles at secondary, particularly around pupils where there's either a family apathy toward education or a pupil apathy toward education. Seeking to re-engage those pupils back into education has been difficult for sure.
Thank you. I did have a further question. Just bear with me a second.
No, that's fine, Anna. Take your time.
Struggling with all the apps and accessing my notes.
That's okay. Take your time.
Thank you. I was looking at the planned actions under the attendance report, and I just wanted to ask a question about extending the notice period for the attendance SLA. I was just wanted to ask what the current notice period is for opting out of the SLA, and whether somebody could provide an example of why a school would choose to opt out.
Yeah, the current notice period is 1 term, and the reasons vary between school, but certainly the last information that I saw, it was that the role of the flow was working effectively, and the level to which the school were bought into the SLA, because schools can buy different number of hours and at different levels. They felt that the work that the flow could do was replicating the work that the education welfare officer was doing, and so they didn't really require the involvement of the central team.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. That's my questions.
Thank you, Anna. Sorry, did you have another question, Anna?
No, thank you, Lisa.
That's all right. That's all right. No problem. So I saw your hand pop back up, then I wasn't sure, so I thought I'd better double check.
Thank you.
Okay, Jamie, Councillor Scriven, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come in on a point that Anna made about attendance. Obviously, reading through the report, you can see that within the last 3 years before the pandemic, the primary and secondary school attendance levels were the lowest in Wales. And I guess following on from what Anna's already asked, following that whole school approach, recommendations and guidance that we've got in place, are parents and young people involved in the development of the strategies and plans we've got going forward in order to boost attendance? I can see the plans we've got in place in the report now, but just wondering what input young people and parents had within those actions that we've come up with.
Thank you, Jamie. Gav, I'm just going to bring Sue in at that point.
Before Gavin answers that one, I will say that we haven't had, I'm going to say that there hasn't been much engagement with children and young people. But what I was going to say, that to actually encourage parents, children back in September, is that we've engaged with corporate comms to actually do a big sort of push for attendance, and actually bring in, you know, in August, sort of during the summer holiday periods and throughout September, to encourage children back into school, which then, if they're not coming back, we do have that opportunity to engage further with them to find out the reasons why. At the moment, I will say, and before I steal Gavin's thunder possibly, is that the COVID card is still being used, that actually, you know, they're still concerned, and it just needs one aspect of COVID in the community, or we're not coming back because we don't want our children to have COVID. And that's certainly being used by a number of our persistent absentees at the moment. But I don't know if, Gavin, you want to say any more on that.
Yeah, we are, and we're cognizant of the parental engagement and their sort of involvement in the discussion. They were also involved in the work that we did through the PRU in terms of looking at their attendance. It's definitely something that paid off in terms of having that understanding of the broader family situation. So it's something that we're open to. If I could just talk briefly more broadly about attendance, because I think it would be worthwhile just to share. Welsh Government basically gave each local authority some grant funding to look at attendance. There were a number of stipulated areas, but where we had elements of flexibility, we've tried to kind of use that. So if it's okay with the chair, I'll just run through a couple of those areas, because I think it would be interesting for your information.
No,
there we go. I was going to take silence as approval there. So one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to take a range of approaches. We didn't want to just invest all our energy and effort into those pupils that are, you know, have significantly low attendance. And we know that we need to look at that, but we know that just encouraging the school or supporting in-school approaches around that aren't necessarily going to be effective by themselves. So we've basically employed some additional capacity in our education welfare team to go into some of the schools where there is particular issues around attendance, and do some bespoke work to support the school with those difficult to reach parents. So that's proving, you know, effective, but it's, you know, it's hard work and it's a slow process. But we're also working with 6 primary schools where we've provided them with additional support to look at reward systems and how they can encourage attendance. And we've seen that in those schools produce really good results. You know, a 5% bump in attendance in the first school that took on that approach, from I think 87% to 92%, and increasing going into this second half term. So we're trying to stimulate that kind of approach with our schools. We're also working with one secondary that's around employing additional LSA time. 9 LSAs working with 10 pupils each. So that's 90 pupils across the school in each year group, across the year groups, in terms of first day response and building those relationships and that connectivity with the parents. We're looking at, with that piece of work, for pupils that are around 80%, so right on that cusp of persistent absenteeism, to keep them out of that bracket, bring them back into school, and once they're in school, obviously the staff have a better opportunity to re-engage them in education and support with that. We've got other kind of reward systems in place. As Sue mentioned, we're looking at comms, and so basically we're trying to use that grant funding to pump prime some of the activity that our schools have been interested in trying, and also we've done some quite significant creative thinking around some of those things too. All of the things that we've put in place, we've seen positive impact, but we know that you know, that if any of you have been involved in attendance before, you know that you can kind of get a significant bump straight away and then it can kind of dip. What we want to do is we want to see that sustained impact, and only then will we see, you know, significant increases and improvements in our attendance rate at individual school level or at a local authority level. So there's some of the plans that we're doing. Happy to come back, you know, at some point in the future, and talk about some of these things in more detail, because I think there's some interesting and exciting things going on in our schools around attendance at the moment.
Great, thank you, Gavin. I'll bring Councillor Claire Jones in just a second. I think it's important to point out that you're quite right. It's a very exhaustive list, isn't it? You know, and I think for us as scrutiny members, when we talk about our forward work plan, inevitably it is a subject that we bring up. And again, whether that comes through as a report or maybe another workshop as well, so everybody has a greater in-depth understanding really of all of these strategies that we're endeavouring to put in place to engage not just the children, but the families, the parents, the carers, etc. as well. Okay, thank you, Gavin. Claire, if you'd like to come in next.
Yeah, sticking with attendance, Gavin, I have to ask, because obviously poverty, with the way economics are going at the moment, with the price of fuel and so on and so forth, has anything been thought about that as well? Because that realistically could bring a new cohort of attendance issues. If some parents who are living out of area, but they're still in the catchment area for certain schools, are finding themselves in a position where they can't afford to get their children to school. So, you know, what has been discussed around that, please?
Nothing specifically at the moment around that. What I would say is that, and this is reflected in the attendance action plan, there's a significant focus on using data in a smart way, and we're keen to make sure that not just at a local authority level where we're sort of looking at, okay, what's the attendance of vulnerable groups by code and that kind of thing, but at a school level that they're using the data that they have in that smart way where they can identify, you know, particular trends that might be a cause of concern that they would want to raise with us centrally. Obviously, some of the issues around transport comes into the transport criteria, and Anthony would probably be better to answer those queries. But certainly, if you know, we're hopeful that Welsh Government will see the effectiveness of the use of the grant in the last financial year, and probably across most local authorities or all local authorities, and should they you know, provide another grant, then again we'll look creatively at what we can do. But I would be, on that particular subject, I would be consciously aware of the transport criteria that Anthony might be able to provide more of a response on if needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Claire. Jamie, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just wanted to come back in off Gavin's response to my last question. I just wanted to know, is there a correlation between those who are low-level attenders and the young people with social, emotional and behavioural needs that we've got on record as well? I'm just thinking in the back of my head as well, I was looking through the report, and obviously there's further recommendations to assess the impact of our provision on young people, specifically the provision on learner wellbeing. So I'm just wondering, is there a link between our low attendees and those young people we identify at risk?
Yeah, there always has been, and I think people tend to think of the phrase SEBD as around the behaviour element, but when you think of the social, emotional, and behaviour, you know, that emotional. If you look at the rise in anxiety, some of the school phobia, and some of the other sort of medical conditions that are prevalent at the moment as well. Definitely, all of those groups will often have a lower attendance rate than other groups, which is why certainly with Gail and the Prue, we wanted to do that piece of work around transport to look at some of those issues, and it's a piece of work that we'll be doing with those pupils that are on special tuition as well, where again that's one of the groups where we've added additional capacity around flow work, family liaison officer work to sort of unpick some of those issues as well.
Thank you, Gavin. Jamie, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's great. Just I wanted to ask one more thing on that as well, just in terms of the support young people again, and then for the emotional behavioural support, etc. Do we have a support directory in place, especially for wellbeing concerns that young people can access through an external website, through the schools themselves, where they can find the right service support that they might need? I'm just thinking of examples that other local authorities have got, like Mind Hub and these different websites and things that young people can access and find the right support based on whether it's an emotional well-being need or a behavioural response need. Have we got something like that in place?
Yeah, bear with me. I'm just going to bring Sue in there.
Okay, Gavin may want to come in as well, but yes, we have got some sort of aspects that we've shared with schools. We've implemented PERMA, which is a self-regulation tool across all our schools, and some of the schools have taken that forward. We've shared a lot of information, but members may be aware or may not be aware that we've actually had a £1.2 million grant from the lottery to actually look at a young person's emotional support. So the idea is that the young people themselves come up with the support that they want to see in the local authority. We only received the funding in March, so we're in the developmental phase at the moment, but it is something that is very much being driven by young people for young people. So we have got a lot of information in place, and in the previous administration, Jamie, we did actually share a report on what was available for sort of emotional well-being with members, and we can certainly reshare that with you, with this new administration and moving forward, just to see what's in place. But just for you to be aware that is something we call, that young people called it snakes and ladders, the other pandemic, and that's what we're working on the moment. So there's some quite exciting things moving forward, but that's really been driven by children and young people themselves.
Thank you so much, Sue. Jamie, did you want to come back there, or are you okay with that?
No, that's brilliant. Just to say thanks for everyone's answers. So if we could recirculate that'd be great if I can see over it. I was aware of snakes and ladders, and I'm probably going to meet with Chloe and the other officer that will be in place when Jan leaves now, so we can work closer with them, with my background anyway, to support that project, because I think it's incredibly needed and will fit under my remit now as the mental health champion for the council as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you, Sue and Gav, for that as well. Gareth, just bear with me. Claire's hand was up. I just wanted to see if she wanted to just come back and reflect on a question she'd asked previously around attendance and poverty.
I just want to ask Sue, when Sue just said about the funding and it's driven by young people, are you including all young people, Sue, even that, the children that it does affect? Are they able to, are they engaging in this?
Right, it's 11 up, so it's secondary school. But yes, and that's what there's a development phase before we actually go into the delivery phase. And that development phase over the next 9 months will be engaging with as many young people as we can. Through youth. We started it in the summer holidays, so we get it through youth. We get it through the summer activities. Then we'll be going to schools. But yes, we will be engaging with as many young people as we can actually get. And it is going to be commissioned. It is going to be run by Safer Merthyr Tydfil. We met with the lottery prior to this meeting to sort of explain the way that we're going forward. So yes, we will definitely be taking that forward with as many young people as we can and as many other partners.
What I'd like to say, Sue, obviously I do work in children's residential, so I am quite used to working with challenging behaviours.
Yeah.
I potentially at some point, if you do find that individuals that may be causing issues and not wanting to engage, I would like to meet up and see whether we can, because I think it's really important. If it's going to be driven by the young people, we need to get everyone's voice. So I would gladly assist at some point to try and get the thoughts from individuals who are refusing to engage but realistically should speak. So
thank you for that, Claire. I'll certainly feed that in. Jamie, we can feed that into Chloe and into that development phase, and it may be we'll have a special a special meeting with the children and young people that you work with, Claire, because I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
I think as well, Sue. I am sort of the champion for homelessness and domestic violence. Now, obviously, domestic violence, some of the children they don't want to speak.
No.
So I mean there's certain aspects that can be included as well, so I will gladly. So Jamie, if you can keep me sort of in the loop with everything that you do, and if there's anything that I can do to assist to make sure, we'll try to have people who don't normally have a voice get that voice, so at least where what they want. I would gladly do it.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
I just add, Chair, just as a recommendation for members of the committee and specifically for yourself, Claire, If you go on to, say, the Merthyr Tydfil's website, take a look at the previous work that's been done with those young people around mental health. There's a mental health toolkit aimed at the 11 to 25 age range, and there's one for the primary school age range as well, which came about as a recommendation of the first project that they wanted for a younger age group. It'll give you an idea of the scope and how young people have already contributed to the agenda. And it's sort of like it's going to be a building block onto what they do next with the grant, from what I'm aware of anyway. Just good to take a look at that as well.
We could also share the presentation that they gave to the lottery, which I think would be very powerful for members to see how we've engaged with young people. Because one of the reasons we got the lottery funding is because it wasn't us that actually presented to the lottery; it was the children and young people themselves.
Yeah,
they were very
powerful.
powerful.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gareth Lewis has been very patient. Just bear with me, Councillor Lewis, because I can see that Anthony Lewis wishes to come in. And then, colleagues, if you so permit me, what we'll do is we'll have Councillor Gareth Lewis after Anthony just to ask his questions, and then I think I'll sum up for the committee, because I really think we've given this some very just questioning now and some in-depth information, unless there are any other burning issues, and we'll just bring it to some conclusion with regards to the scrutiny and how we take this item forward and some of the things that we've discussed. Okay, Anthony Lewis, jump in, and then I shall bring in the very patient Councillor Gareth Lewis.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up Claire's points around the transport criteria, we currently have two transport policies. We have the one that's based on distance, and that's based on the statutory distances. So it's 2 miles for primary school children and 3 miles for secondary school children. And we have the policy that's based on SEN, disability or medical need, and that's based on an assessed need for school transport to be able to access, whether it's a special school or an LRB, or even a mainstream provision. So they are the current policies. There's no current recognition for poor attendance as being part of a criteria in order to qualify for transport, albeit I think services like the PRU have in the past used transport to enable attendance, where that's been found to be successful, and there is a small budget within the PRU that's been used within special tuition and the AUTIS provisions overall that's been used to support that. And Gavin's picked up that they've been looking at that again recently to see whether or not there would be any benefit in providing transport to enable attendance. So I think we would need to ensure that there's a good evidence base for the provision of transport to support attendance, because there would be a cost associated with that. We'd have to consider any cost implications, potentially any policy implications, before then deciding whether or not to take something like that forward then. In order to be able to enable attendance through transport. But currently, other than in the PRU budget, we don't have that within the council's budget at the moment. Okay,
thank you, Anthony, ever so much. And your turn now then, Councillor Gareth Lewis. Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if this has previously been asked prior to me entering the meeting. The Eston report says that the authority plans to discuss the potential for additional capacity at Reader Wine, and I was just wondering what progress is being made on acquiring that additional capacity.
Thank you, Gareth. They hadn't been asked, so I'll bring Sue straight in at that point. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think the wording was around engaging with RCT, wasn't it? And I think as members, previous members or members from the previous administration will know that in our WESP there is a commitment to undertake a feasibility study to look at secondary Welsh medium provision for the children of Merthyr Tydfil. That is something that Anthony, one of his officers, and myself will be looking at over the summer period now, and we will be bringing a report to Cabinet. If it's something that this scrutiny want us to look at in some detail, we can bring it. We can certainly, that's something for you to consider in the in your forward work plan, if you want to do that before it actually goes to Cabinet and Council, to actually look at that feasibility study for our Welsh medium secondary provision, because it could have financial implications for the local authority, depending on which way we actually go.
Thank you, Sue. Gareth, did you have any other questions?
No, that's it for me.
Oh, bless you, and you were so patient. Okay, not a problem. Colleagues, if there are no further questions, what I'd like to do is just do a bit of a summary on what you've all asked now, if that's okay with officers. Inevitably, there are some recommendations on agenda item number 5, and they are that the content of the report is discussed and noted. We have, Jeff, I'll bring you in just a second. We have, of course, discussed it. Members consider if the actions proposed will address the recommendations and areas for development within the report, and members consider if there are other aspects of attendance they wish to scrutinise. My suggestion is, guys, that, you know, we've had some really in-depth answers from the officers today, and there's a lot of work in progress, which is inevitably what we would expect, yeah, especially from Eston recommendations. So what I think we need to do is pick up on some of these key points and include those then in our forward work plan so that we can pick those up. So where Sue just talked about West, etc., you know, we can pick that up. Anna talked about attendance, you know, Claire coming in with the poverty agenda, as well as Jamie and Jeff as well, you know, so it's those type of things that we can talk about when we do our reflection in just a minute or two, but obviously then we can take these items forward as well as part of this report. So I'll just bring Jeff in.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to mention just the one part that isn't being mentioned at the moment. Recommendation 2 is the weakness of scrutiny. I think, and it is only a personal opinion, that we're already demonstrating the improvement of this by questions we raise, by the support and understanding extended to the education department, by the training given and being undertaken to be given both to elected members and to co-opted members, to bring them up to everybody up to the same level. And the makeup of this committee, yeah, I think stands us in good stead of going forward. So whilst we haven't proved anything yet, Chair, yeah, I think we've started on a good foot.
Well, yes, I echo those sentiments, Jeff, and thank you for that, because that is all of us taking that commitment. As I said to you in our pre-meeting last week, it's us taking that commitment and taking that forward, you know, because it is our responsibility as members, co-opted members, etc., you know, to ensure that, you know, this is an in-depth, constructive meeting, scrutiny meeting, and, you know, has added value for the council and, of course, for the officers as well, you know, and they feel that they're gaining from it as well in taking matters forward. Okay, colleagues, so in relation to this item then, I hope you all agree that we have discussed it appropriately and noted all of the actions and the recommendations. As I said, we will discuss those when we come to the forward work plan agenda item. And on that note then, I'd just like to thank Sue, her team and all the officers really in addressing those very robust questions. I hope you feel the same way as Jeff just alluded to in relation to this particular item. So thanks everybody for that, and no doubt we will pick up on some of those going forward, so much appreciated. Now on today's other agenda item, and thank you Michelle as well, to our cabinet member. On today's other agenda item, we were talking about the work programme, the scrutiny work programme moving forward. Have we got the right issues in the right way at the right time and place? I'm just going to touch on that, guys, if that's okay with you. And that was really, again, to reiterate the discussions that we had last week, and for any members who missed that, it really is about having a robust scrutiny programme in place now. Just again, as Jeff said, so we can have that constructive challenge in place as well. But also as scrutiny members and chair, etc., you know, we feel well informed. So in relation to this scrutiny and others that we may be part of, you know, we can really take part in these scrutiny discussions and also workshops and further planning. You know, some of my ideas and how I would like to strengthen that going forward. And I think, you know, every you know, thanks is given, if you like, to our democratic support services and to our corporate team, sorry, with Andrew Mogford and Safe and the like, and everybody there, Matthew, and obviously everybody else joining now, Neil and Jane, etc., really taking us forward and strengthening the whole scrutiny process. And you can see that within the training some of us have already had, some of the training co-opted members are due to have, and also the handbook that we then received. And I know last week we talked about a lot of acronyms and things like that, but hopefully you'll get used to them, and you've seen those lists of those wonderful acronyms that we talk in this wonderful world of local authority and education especially. So I'm not going to say any more about it, because what I want to do is, once we've thanked officers and our cabinet member again, is when we talk about agenda item number 5, reflections, is then we'll just swap it around and we'll talk about it under there moving forward for committee members. So on that note, I'd like to thank all the officers and the Cabinet member for their attendance. You're more than welcome to leave now as I stay with my scrutiny members and my officers really to talk about reflections and taking our forward plan forward, as I should say. And I'm due to meet Sue and Cabinet member on the 29th of June with Gareth, I think. I'll check if you're in there as well, regarding some of these ideas and the forward work plans. So thank you for that, and thank you for everybody for their contributions today. So if my scrutiny colleagues can stay on board with officers outside of scrutiny, thank you ever so much. We'll just give you a minute or two to leave the meeting. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as they're leaving, I do apologise. I had a little distraction during the meeting. I have an injured house sparrow to the right-hand side of me. So it was actually going a little bit mad by the right-hand side of me. So I do apologise. These things happen in the world of Kevin Coyd. Okay. Colleagues, can I just thank you first of all for your contributions there. You know, this is really what we want to see in scrutiny. It's not only, you know, as I said to you last week, those 1 or 2 questions, but really then digging deeper as well, you know. So you know, lots of thanks from me in relation to that. It certainly makes my life easier. It's not like, you know, trying to get blood out of a stone. It's really great to see everybody contributing to the scrutiny, as it so should be, you know, taking it forward as well. And, you know, I'm sure it'll get stronger and better as we move into the next couple of months and years. What I wanted to touch upon, if that's okay, is really reflections about the report recommendations. And as chair, I like to guide you on some of these first of all, if that's okay. Inevitably, just what Andrea alluded to, which is the SIG guidance. Yeah, so we need to look at the school improvement guidance. I'll make a mental note of that just as our forward work programme. Anna brought up about attendance, as did others. So again, I know there's been some task and finish groups with that. I think we'll pop that into the forward work programme as we keep on, you know, transitioning out of this pandemic and seeing how that then works going into the autumn term now commencing in September and the impact on young people there. I think some very pertinent points were made about the poverty link there as well, guys, and transport, because I know I have a particular issue here in Vayner in Kevin Coyd with children trying to attend Ysgol Graig because of Stagecoach, not necessarily through poverty, but because Stagecoach have changed the bus timings. So it's having a massive impact here on us. I think there's an opportunity perhaps for us to either do an inquiry day, and when I say a day, it could be a couple of hours, maybe half day, or a workshop on the links to the poverty agenda with the social services department and our scrutiny, because it's, you know, you can imagine how big a subject it is. And I think whilst we're asking questions, I know colleagues will be asking questions in that scrutiny as well. But I think if we have an inquiry day, because, you know, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I'm thinking health board commitment, you know, their responsibility. Jamie touched upon Safe and Merthyr Tydfil with a couple of other things. And I think perhaps it's just bringing some of those bubbles together and having a bit of a workshop on it, or as I said, an inquiry day. So I'll talk to officers about that and we'll add that into our forward work programme as well. But now, look, reflection is about you guys as well. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump in. How did you feel today's meeting went? I'll open the floor up to you guys.
I'll start since I just started talking. Obviously that this was my first scrutiny, so it was quite interesting. As Lisa will know, all you others, I was quite apprehensive when I was coming into this, thinking, oh gosh, what am I letting myself in for? But I enjoyed that. I think it's extremely interesting, and on a professional side of things, it's nice to hear that certain children, you know, Jamie, I thought when you showed quite an interest in the PRU side of things, which I deal with a lot of the children in PRU, they're not in the Merthyr area, you know, but I am dealing with children who don't attend school, so I see things like that. So I found it extremely interesting. I was interested with everyone's questions. I appreciated all the answers that came forward, and I would just like to say myself and Clive are also on social services, so you know, so that I would be able to bring things forward, because I did notice the Summer of Fun was mentioned very lightly on the learning, which is going to be brought tomorrow within the social services scrutiny. So I should, you know, I'll look at that again and see what they say tomorrow, because like I said, it did approach on it slightly with the Summer of Fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I you know, poor Gareth thinking that your question wasn't answered, Gareth, either. Nobody asked that question, so, and I think that was a very, it was good, because I saw that and I didn't even consider that one, so thank you. But I really enjoyed it, so
Good.
thank you.
Okay. Good, I'm glad, because it was your first scrutiny as well, wasn't it? So as I said, I'm really proud of you guys as well for, you know, giving it a go as well and asking those questions, some great questions. So I appreciate that. I think before I forget, when you look at page 19 with 5.2, which are the key 4 recommendations, which, you know, you all alluded to, at 5.3, other areas for development within the body of the report. When Gareth and I talk about the forward work plan as well, these are the key things that we're going to, you know, ask to be put in there, because they're all so pertinent. And as I said, they all come together really, don't they, for how we want to see education per se being improved for the local authority, as well as some of those other things we talked about last week, which is meeting some of our schools and things like that as well, or, you know, inviting them into scrutiny when appropriate. And those of us who have done some of the scrutiny training so far, and we did a WLGHA one the other day, was making sure our agendas aren't too heavy. Yeah, because otherwise, if we thought now we had another 2, 3, 4 items on this one, you know, you'd miss that sense of really gaining from this particular important report that we had tonight. Okay, any other, one other thing I wanted to say to you is, don't ever worry about reserving the right to speak. Okay, you don't have to in scrutiny, so you can ask questions and then you can always talk then, you know, even if you have an observation, you can do that after your question if you want to. So you can ask a question and say, oh, can I ask a question on, let's think, the pupil referral unit, and then say, oh, well, thank you, because what I'd actually observed was blah, blah, blah. So you're quite happy to do that, quite welcome to do that. Okay, guys, don't ever worry about that. I love that type of input as well, so that's not a problem. Any other feedback, any other reflections from anybody?
Could I just ask one quick question? And it's the wrong place to ask it, but I'll just ask it, please.
That's all right, fire away, Jeff.
Yeah. From time to time, there comes up issues that are raised either nationally or locally or on the doorstep. You know, when lots of us went out, most successfully, some up not, but, you know, who found what people and the parents especially had conceived ideas about education. And there are some things within reports that are quite challenging, but there's others that have done really, really well. And these successes don't seem to be celebrated. And I just think that we need some kind of mechanism, or we need to be able to put forward to the Education Department perhaps a suggestion that some kind of mechanism be employed to put the good news out there. It's a rotten time out there generally, and if there is good news to be had, let's publicise it, let's make use of it. And you know, that's from a strictly impartial view. I just think we need just to take it out there to say, you know, our kids are actually doing quite well in this, and they're doing quite well at that. It's just important. Thank you, Chair.
No, you're welcome. Before I bring Gareth in, 2 points there. So you can do it 2 ways, okay? So you can either, you know, bring it up with an officer and say, just an observation. I just think you're missing a trick here and selling yourself short. And I think you should bring that up as a positive news story. So you could say that in a particular scrutiny meeting. Or we can refer it to the governance scrutiny where they look after comms, and we can say, well, actually, you know, from our scrutiny, learning scrutiny, we've actually noticed that we're selling ourselves short. We're not shouting really from the hilltops when there is something really positive. So we can do that as a bit of a scrutiny referral to them to to make sure that there's this feedback loop, if you like, about having those positive stories and it's getting through to comms, who can then, I'm sure, quite happily publicise it as well. Perhaps even taking, you know, doesn't necessarily always have to be a spokesperson, but perhaps taking a quote from somebody like yourself, Jeff, as a member of this particular scrutiny, you know, and I think it's useful then because you can see the engagement is far deeper as well and far more people involved. So yes, a good point actually. Gareth.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I just feel that it's only fit and proper that we do focus on the Eston report as our main priority during the early stages of the scrutiny committee. Just a point on that, though. Was it mentioned that the Eston report will come before full council at some stage, Lisa?
Yeah, so inevitably, there's elements of the Eston report that will come up on the 6th of July full council. Okay. I think you and I are meeting on the 29th, aren't we? Where, you know, again, we'll focus on these key points that we want in the forward work programme, and that's where attendance for me I feel would be a latter one, just because these are the priorities and it'll sort of fall into that then as well. But the Eston report will come up on the 6th, and then again it's another opportunity to say about what we asked on today and those future action plans as well on the 6th of July.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay. Okay, colleagues, if there are no further comments or reflections, then agenda item number 7 is feedback on scrutiny activities. We're not there yet. We will get there. We'll talk about inquiry days and workshops. So inevitably, we'll talk about that agenda item as and when that's appropriate. And at number 8, then there's any other business deemed urgent by myself. I have none. All I would say to you is, you know, keep abreast of the world of education until our next scrutiny meeting. When Gareth and I have the meeting on the 29th of June, either us or officers will feed back to you on those items. Apologies, my phone is going alongside me. I should have put it on silent. Just a naughty chair thing. So what we'll do is we'll just make sure that we feed back to you, okay, what those key items are, because that'll give you an opportunity to perhaps just do a little bit of digging, do a little bit of background research or something, talk to our scrutiny officers, you know, talk to Neil and Jane or Safe and say, can I get a bit more information on this? Can you have a look at this for me? Yeah, so you can glean that information then. Just gives you a little bit more confidence and a little bit more knowledge then prior to the scrutiny meetings, just as you've done today. Okay, Jamie.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question to any other business chair, and it was just around safeguarding concerns within education. Has there been any, because my emails have been playing up quite a bit, I've been on the phone to IT, but has anything come through around concerns around these recent TikTok trends where young people are being hospitalised? There's a thing going on at the minute with the young people choking each other basically in order to get one another to pass out, and there's been a few hospitalisations across the country. I just don't know if anything's been reported in our area.
No, there was just I just give some money to a GoFundMe page for a young boy who did this exact thing, and it's a massive high court profile one in the news at the moment. They live in England, but you'll see it. It's in the news because he did this exact same thing, young lad, and she's fighting to not have his life support machine turned off. So he's in the national paper. So I just supported that. It's very real. I haven't seen anything from our local authority. I will follow it up and just see if there is anything. I know that there was another TikTok issue that was reported to us when I was cabinet member prior to election, but that was in a whole other arena of safeguarding. But I'll chase up and check on this one, Jamie. And again, I think, you know, just make sure that for the cabinet member and for Sue, that our schools are sending this message out as well to the children. I'm quite sure they are, because this young lad is of primary age, not even secondary age. You know, he's of primary age. So I think it's important that they do that. So thank you for bringing that up, Jamie. I'll follow that up for us.
That's great. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Okay, colleagues, I shall bring the meeting to a close. Thank you to our officers who've stayed on board with us. Thank you to you lot. Some of you will be in scrutiny tomorrow, and I shall be in touch with you all soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Lisa.
Bye. Bye.